Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hi. Yeah, so like the first question was whether or not we can take a copy and write core dump. Was yes, but it's still an expensive process that we cannot expect to be able to do like in under a second. I just wanted to clarify the core issue, at least from my perspective, which is that the promise can add an error handler later. So I can have a promise now, and I can add like the error handler. And it's impossible to. It's too slow to take a core dump during those 5 seconds, and it's impossible to like kill the node process because the error can still be recovered from, and that's like JavaScript specifications.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And that even today, like some of the hooks that you do have, like on caught exception, they occur too late still, right? Like even,
So when we implemented.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we implemented unhandled rejection ago, the choice was made to fire unhandled rejection. It's probably still not that bad to get, but it's too late because sync will change the stack by then.
You're chopping in and out.
Okay, good. That's not just me.
So can you say that again?
Oh, sorry, very fast internet.
Hard to understand you.
So I'll try more slowly. Okay. So when we implemented a year and a half, decision was made to take them after all the microdisc. So it's too late for people who want, for some who want, post might have been changed by synchronous code that's running by then. And even unhandled rejections are not a sound strategy because also we unhandled the rejection event, which is called whenever like unhandled rejection falsely like an error that's not recovered from. Ben talks about changing the strategy for unhandled rejection to be on GC, which is even later.
Right, exactly. Like if it happened on GC, you'd want to have to have already captured the data that you need, right?
The data capture needs to happen synchronously. And
sorry, can you just say that last part again? Because you dropped out near the end.
So it is impossible to know if the promise is handled or unhandled, which means you have to take the memory dump when, and I'm not sure, like for some rejections can be stuff like HTTP request, not it's like operational core dump. We typically read that.
Yeah, not really. I think we're getting about every other word, unfortunately.
Oh, I'll write it in chat.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Right. So yeah, I'll just, as you type that, I'll relay it. So promise rejections can mark operational errors often, stuff like request failing. So it's not viable to take a core dump whenever the rejection is created. Yeah, that's true. And yeah, in advance, we don't know which rejections will be unhandled as well, since you can always add another handler. I guess the idea of on GC was that by the time it's being GC'd, you can no longer add a handler. But up until then, you don't really know. Right. So as it is, you can't solve the whole problem. It's irreducible to the halting problem. However, we can still be used for the non-general case, right? But currently we capture them the next tick, which is still too late. Yep, that's... Yeah, no problem. So that I think that does sum up the two key points. And one is, we can look at can you generate them at the right point, so that if you've decided you've decided that you have enough information to somehow say, yeah, we want to generate them. Can we generate them at the right place? And then the second part is then figuring out what can we do to help figure out when the right place is. And that's where, I think you might have even suggested the double run approach, where the first time, maybe you capture just enough information to figure out that, the stack trace looks like X, and in the end it wasn't handled. So the next time we hit that, we'll take the core dump to be able to debug that. And yeah, I see Ben's also mentioning that, for some use cases like async functions, the problem's easy because catch is always statically analyzable. So I guess the idea was, to develop some test cases which would show the couple problems you were just talking about, well, one, we're not getting it at the right place. And then two, we can't, there's certain cases where we'd like to get it, but there's other cases where we don't want to get it. And then try and, start changing Node to try and make come up with something that does the right case for those different use cases. So one thing that Ben might be good is if you took a look at those tests and see if they capture the cases that you think are the important ones or not.
So do we actually have a point where we know we do want to create a core dump? Is it just that it's at that point much later than we want it? So you're missing data that has now gone away. Is that the problem? Yeah,
well, so for example, a promise, one of the issues is that the promise, you can add a rejection handler anytime after, even if it's already executed.
Right.
And if you add it, it then executes the rejection handler, right? So in which case you're not an uncaught exception. So one of the suggestions was, well, if you on GC said, okay, well, at GC you can't add a rejection handler, so if there isn't one, then we're going to fire, right? But at that point, you're way past the time where you'd want to have generated the core dump.
Okay, so you're saying at the next GC, you can go, as you're going through all these things, you can find out which ones are bad, and you can trigger core dumps at that point?
Well, I think the idea was if a promise is being collected, you can't add another handler after that, although
right.
Ben is mentioning that the GC may have false negatives.
Okay.
But it's that you may be able to figure it out at some point, but by the time you figure it out, it's too late to capture the things that you want, and it's too expensive to capture them all. So what do you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, one way might be to capture a small amount of information, or have a switch that lets you capture a small amount of information when the things get created that would then be available in a core dump.
Right. Now you can already get the stack because that's passed as if there's an unhandled rejection due to an exception, that stack trace is already available. So you have that. I think the idea was to capture information like that and whatever else small amount of information that's cheap enough,
right,
so that you can use that to later try and pattern match.
Yeah.
And say, okay, we've seen this one before. We believe that the second time this happens, it's going to be the same one. Therefore, we're going to trigger off the full debugging information. And and I think Ben's mentioning in the chat that he was talking about the copy on write core dump is to capture things. Was trying to do something where you try and capture just things that have changed and take the full core dump later. I don't know that that's gonna. I can't think of how that works. Like you really need you know, if you had to take a core dump every minute and then could do a delta from that or something, but even the 1 minute.
Yeah.
I don't know, Richard, have you ever run into anything that gives you a delta type core dump?
No, but I mean, I know the copy and write thing because that's usually about when you've got a fairly large memory image.
Sure.
You can do, you know about that. You
Yeah.
can do the form.
Yeah, that one, yeah. I just
that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure how that's going to help in this case. I see what you're saying, trying to get the changes, but there's so much changing that. Yeah, I mean, is there the other thing? If these things are going wrong within, less than a second or whatever, you can usually keep rolling buffers of things to reduce the amount of data you're storing. That's the other way of doing it, like a flight recorder trace buffer, where it has a very limited lifetime, but it's keeping quite a bit of information for the most recent things that happened.
Right, so like the trace, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so you might have been able to keep something useful so that even. I think though we can probably, like it sounded like there were some V8 APIs where we may actually be able to capture things closer to when it needs to be. So if we know we want to capture it.
Right. I mean, as you said, the multi-phase approach means that you gradually put more and more, or you bring the diagnostic point back early once you know a bit more about it. But you need quite a lot of parameters, so you don't get the core dumps generated for the wrong case. You just want to target the particular case.
Right.
So maybe there's a kind of iterative approach that works there, where you didn't get enough information the first time, but you know from the information the first time it failed that you need to capture X, Y, Z, and also trigger the dump a bit earlier.
Yeah, like it easily could be that maybe the stack trace is enough, right?
Yeah.
Like it could be that if you do a unique match on the stack trace, that's actually going to get you, it's the same one. I don't know though. We'll have to experiment.
Again, in Java, we had that thing was produce a dump on this exception type X, where it is being thrown from methods A, B, C on the stack. So you had a kind of extra filter.
Right.
Said, I'm interested in null point exception, but only if it was thrown by this method with this parent, with this grandparent. So you can put that kind of granularity in.
Right.
So maybe the first time you just get a stack trace, the second time you start filtering and capturing more data earlier.
Right. So Ben's, I'm not sure I quite follow, but what were you talking about, schedulers? A scheduler for promises? It's... Okay, so Ben's typing up a description of using schedulers. I guess I to be honest, don't know enough about promises yet to quite follow. But it sounds interesting because it sounds like it gives us a way to know when a promise wouldn't be handled. The user specifies that a promise won't be handled anymore. Take a dump and the user decides when. Sorry, Max, what was that?
No, I didn't say anything.
Okay. Right now, I guess Ben, in terms of the connection, though, does that help with the fact that the rejection's happening after the exception has been swallowed? Like it's, the exception happened, the rejection took place, and then if we then actually generate the core dump at that point, it's still a bit too late, right? Or is it something that there's something that addresses that too? Right. So yeah, so it's an interesting, like I think it sounds like it's an interesting additional avenue to follow in terms of figuring out when something is handled or not handled. We still need to look at then, how do you use that in conjunction with getting the dump at the right time. So I guess, Ben, in terms of the examples, you said that the ones that are there cover some of the basic ones. Could you list out the ones that aren't covered so far? Because it would be good to get a full set there. Okay, so Ben's going to add some extra ones to the issues, and then I think also if you could write up a short description of what you were talking about in terms of the concept with schedulers and everything. We'll add that into the things to examine. The other thing is, do you have pointers for Max to docs and so forth that talk about, the code that or APIs that V8 provides for dealing with promises? And somebody had mentioned at the VM Summit that there's an API where you could register for, say, a rejection. And I think that's the point at where we might want to generate, a dump file. If we know it's the right rejection, you would say, okay, rejection's happening. And so right now I'm going to, if it's an exception and it's a stack trace we've seen before, I'm going to create, the artifacts. So I think we're, one of the first steps Max needs is that set of APIs to look at and kind of understand what's going on there.
Do you think we'll be wanting to generate or trigger the dump from native code, or will this be a JavaScript userland thing?
I believe that these hooks were native code at the V8 level.
Okay.
And I think you kind of got to. It depends. We need some native code to hook at that point because we want our artifacts to be triggered exactly then, not sometime later, like on the next tick or anything. Now, whether it calls back into JavaScript to do some of the work, that's probably okay. And for your benefit, Richard, in the examples we used Node report.
Okay.
Because it's easier and smaller than a core file to look at the content and to tell whether you got it the right time.
Yeah.
So basically, we set them up to generate either on the unhandled exception or by just triggering it ourselves, and then we can look at the result and say, well, okay, the stack trace is actually showing us that we caught it when we expected or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just interested because the stuff we work on. There are quite a few ways out there of generating core dumps non-destructively from JavaScript land, but we need to look at doing that from native probably.
Right. I think at least these hooks. So this is good. Ben has added into the chat that we can register for sync rejection, and he's posted. So Max, if you can grab that URL and add it into the issue.
Yep.
With a bit of the context, because that's probably something for you to take a look at and take a look at the code there to see how you would do that. Because I think that's one of the experiments we probably want to do is just show, okay, well, we can actually generate one at the right point. Yes, we have the problem of we can't always generate it, but at least we need to show that we can actually generate it at the right place or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't know. Ben, did you have any other questions or things you wanted to talk about? Right. So he said no. The other thing I did want to suggest to this group, does it make sense for us to get together like, you know, once every 2 weeks or some, you know, at some interval, just to have Max give everybody an update of where we're at, to have people add their suggestions? I don't know, Ben, would that be something you'd be interested in? Okay, so he's up for it. So I think that would be good. So maybe yeah, sounds good, right? He says probably on better internet. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to try Zoom or Skype or something?
We can try Zoom, but I'm not sure that was the problem here. I think it was just maybe the internet on his end was a bit flaky.
Okay.
So I think maybe in the beginning, maybe we can start like once a week, and because, well, you know, getting ramped up, it's probably good to have more ideas. So maybe we'll schedule something for like a week next week, if that's everybody, and you know, we'll see where Max has gotten, have some more ideas, and go from there. Does that all sound good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'll set a public issue, but I'll make sure to CC all of you guys so that you know when it is. And I guess in terms of time, does this time work for all of you guys if we set it as a regular time? Or it sounds like maybe, Ben, a different time might work better for you. Okay, so if we said this time regularly, does that work for Richard and
Yeah,
Max?
that's good for me.
Okay.
Sure,
So, yeah,
works for me.
Okay, so great. So Mondays at 12 noon.
And if there's one or two other people who were involved in discussions, the joint people in particular,
Yep.
who were, you know, might be able to see if we can get one of those on board at some point.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely post it publicly in this meeting that we're having this regular meeting, and like, yeah, I'll add at least Julian to say, hey, if you can show up, that would be great. And so, Max, I think, you know, it sounds like you got a few good next steps there, in that you can check out that API, and, you know, figure out if maybe we can generate, you know, figure out how to hopefully generate the core dump at the right point. Unfortunately, I'm out of the office, so I'll be a bit hard to contact. But Richard, Max could probably reach out to you. I know you've done some of the.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, especially if you want some help with generating the core dumps, things like that.
Yeah, I was just thinking he might need, like, using some of the V8 APIs, you know, might need a little bit of help to get started. So.
Oh, that too. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so Max, I'll forward you Richard's contact info.
Sure,
well.
that'd be great.
Grab him this week if I'm not around. Okay, sounds good. So if there's any last things before we close for this week?
No, that's good.
Okay,
Yep.
Nope, great. We'll talk to you guys all next week then. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.